Howdy, all you delicious people. I am here today to review a Nicolas Cage film. Honestly, just because reasonably I can't actually say the title of this movie within the first minute of a video because it's a technical cuss word. So, by the first minute of this review, I will just be calling it a Nicolas Cage film until the first minute is up. So, this movie actually covers what is to actually be pretty dang close to a real life superhero kind of story where a lot of people are to have just kind of a common barrage, like a common skill of just desperately wanting to be able to be a superhero without any actual real true legitimate superpowers. There are some people in this movie that have like a Batman kind of skill of combat, skill of just weaponry and an arsenal of things. And we also have people that are, their superpower is that they are rich. And then we have Dave. And then we have Dave who just decides like, well, this just seems like the right thing to do. And I should actually just go and, like, why not? Why hasn't anybody ever thought about this? And why not actually just stand up to people? And, like, if anything, it'll give Dave much more confidence eventually when he is to go back into his other life as Dave Lazuski. Because really, Dave would see himself as being an invisible person or just this guy that is fairly awkward when it comes down to the opposite gender. And Dave luckily did have friends, but really when it came down to the girl department, really, like, he had nothing that that made him like think that at any point in any time soon he was ever going to get a piece of that pie, if you know what I mean. So, going into this film, the thing that I honestly do like about this film is it has a very well-rounded, like, everybody has their time in this film, and that's the thing that I like about it. There are good usages for every one of these characters. It is kind of funny and interesting to note that originally that Brad Pitt was actually going to quite possibly get the Big Daddy role. I wonder if this movie would have really made a big impact if Brad Pitt would have played Big Daddy or not. A lot of people could be like, no, like, I like Nicolas Cage, and really Nicolas Cage for the longest time wanted to play some kind of superhero-like character. At some point, he was going to be Superman in some movie that just never worked out. And also, like, Nicolas Cage has gone and done a number of different kind of superhero voices at some point or another. So, so going into this, really, some people may not know about the real life superhero community, and really, especially in the second film of Kick-Ass 2, you can really see what a real life superhero would really be doing, instead of just consistently going off and going on to these missions where they are to assassinate and kill any number of like high end like guys or whichever, like the Yakuza or whoever. Like, a lot of times it's just community service, or a lot of times it's taking a cat from out of a tree, and that's a bulk of what you are to do in real life. You're not going to be all of a sudden a assassin for hire or whatever, like, of that kind of skill. But it is kind of interesting to see the Big Daddy hit girl version of this film. Just because really we have Hit Girl, who is a really strong female character. We also have Katie, that I think is also a real strong female character, because a lot of times when you have the like the female girlfriend for the main superhero, a lot of times that character is just kind of a throwaway. It's a lot of times just being like, yeah, I didn't care for this person, but actually it seemed that this character was actually rather helpful in kind of progressing this story, and that's the thing I like about this film. From what I do know, because I read the kind of the featurettes and the behind the scenes of this thing, but also I heard a lot of stuff afterwards where there were some characters that were in these films that kind of, I guess, just didn't like what they were doing with that film, had realized that, like, yeah, like, you know what, it probably did get my start, or you know what, it did give me, like, a pretty decent paycheck, but when looking back on it, like, I just felt like, ugh, about it. And so really, more than likely, that might be a reason for why there may not be a third film. Just because, reasonably, I guess, there's some people that will say that they are never going to come back to this franchise or this series or whatever. And so, more than likely, if they probably were to do a third film, it would probably have to be a reboot or something like that, probably for a third film, which doesn't quite make any sense. But I think there is some interest about eventually at some point doing a reboot, but we would never know. So, going into this film, I find this film fun. We really have Dave, who is this superhero who realizes once he is to be a superhero, what this really entails, what it's really to be asking of him. And then all of a sudden we are to see Hit Girl and Big Daddy, who are just to easily go and just slice and dice through everybody to showcase, like, yeah, this is what this really, like, entails. Because really also a lot of people made the consensus of, like, well, why hasn't anybody ever wanted to be a superhero? And then it's like, well, if someone were to become a superhero, like, they would be dead within like a day. Like, someone would come in and just knife them or shoot them and they would be dead. Like, there's only so much that you can afford with a bulletproof vest or some kind of kung fu karate like training. There's only so much that will get you so far. And then there's also the escalation of what you are trying to eventually accomplish with what you want to do with your superhero-esh like ability. So, going into this, I thought this movie was fun because it takes it into a much more reality-like realm, even though there has to be some kind of escalation and fun-like thing. But, like, this movie is so much fun. I really like how we have Nicolas Cage, who's playing this, like, Adam West, like, Batman. He kind of sounds just like Adam West's Batman. But, yeah, so let's get into this. Let's go into that double five, because I think it's about roughly that time to go in much more thorough deep dive about this movie. It is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Plus, also, like, you could easily tell via mask and such how much I really just liked this movie. I like this franchise. And this was a fun movie. This is such fun. Because, like, I think everybody, like, would dream about something like this, that, like, anybody would probably put on the cape and cowl, or for me, I wouldn't put on a cape because I don't like capes, but but everybody would put on the cowl and want to think that they could be especially a super strength person and, like, take on the world. But then eventually you realize what you're actually going to do is get cats out of a tree. So let's go into spoiler times if we haven't already. So spoilers. So in the very beginning of this film, we are to have a man that is to spread his wings, his metal wings, and jump off a skyscraper thinking, or everyone is thinking, that this guy is going to course correct and fly off. Well, this guy is to land, and land fairly hard, into a taxi cab and die. So we are to find out that this guy who was to set up his metal wings had some mental issues, and I guess he didn't think about his metal wings very carefully, and so that cost him to die. So evidently that was 6 months from the beginning of this film. So we have to do 6 months earlier, bizarrely, because no one had ever really thought about being a superhero before. And so we go here to showcase Dave Lazuski and like what his life is like. How basically Dave would consistently mentioning how many rapid times he has just been jerking it. It seems like, if anything, the big takeaway that I kept like having in my mind was like how many numerous times that like Dave was like fantasizing about something or looking into something so that way he could destroy his tissue box numerous times over. Uh, so so Dave is to basically tell us that he is a guy who is to feel invisible, like he doesn't have a girl to his name, and so really there are some times where he is to even fantasize about his teacher. We've all probably been there. No judgment, no whichever. Uh, Dave is to eventually be in class, and all of a sudden there's a pretty attractive looking teacher, and Dave is like, wow, you know what? Like this teacher of mine, you know what? I'm gonna all of a sudden have a little bit of a daydream. And so all of a sudden we have like Dave just watching on as his teacher is to all of a sudden desperately want Dave and start to rip her clothes off to try to get Dave into a romantic fantasy of sorts, and then all of a sudden we are cut off by Dave's teacher just going, Dave, like, aren't shouldn't you be looking at Hamlet right now? And Dave is like, oh, sorry. You know what? Here's what would have been a better joke here. So instead of them going and reading Hamlet, I have been watching numerous movies lately where like in Disturbing Behavior, bizarrely they were reading Dickens in that movie. In Superman 2, Superman wasn't watching the news, he was too busy reading Dickens. In this movie, it would have been the funniest thing if this teacher would have said, like, shouldn't you be reading Dickens instead of. Like, shouldn't you be concentrating on Dickens right now? Like, I think that would have been hilarious. That would have been a funny like innuendo kind of joke. But anyways, um I thought that would have been a better joke that should have landed there. Like, haha, Dickens. Anyways, so but evidently I guess since like Hamlet could be technically at some points a kind of like, for some people they might get off on like Shakespearean like talk. Maybe, probably not. I didn't think so. So so Dave is to feel invisible besides his best friends. So we have Dave who is to desperately just to be desperate over this girl who is named Katie. And so Dave is at his locker, and Katie is to call out, like, "Oh, hey, hi, gorgeous." And Dave is like, "Oh, well, hi." And Katie is looking at him like, huh? Because Erica, when Dave is to close his locker, we see Erica there. And Katie was talking to Erica, mentioning that she was gorgeous. And Dave was like, "Oh no! Like I just heard what you were saying, and I was just shoot me now." uh, a warrior's death. Uh, so yeah, that's that awkward moment where you just can't take back what you said, or after you realize what you had said, you're like, I am stupid. So, but it's funny when they come back to that later on in the film. So, we also find out that it seems that Dave's mother had just keeled over one day while they were eating cereal in the morning. There wasn't some kind of suspicious death or whatever, as if Dave were to mention, like, that over his mother's grave, he was going to mention, I'm going to avenge you, mother! In a very nerdy like voice. But yeah, like basically nothing happened after that. It's basically just Dave and now Mr. Lazuski just going and checking on the bowl of or the box of cereal to see if they had changed anything about the box. And Dave is like, no, I don't think they did. So this is to eventually kind of like, so we're gonna get like a real understanding of Dave, and eventually how much that he is to go on computer and basically look at any number of websites to again destroy his Kleenex box by giving himself a little beef jerkin, if you know what I mean. So Dave, Todd, and Marty are to go to a comic book shop and just kind of ask about, like, well, why hasn't anybody ever really decided that they want to become a superhero? Like, everybody bizarrely right now at the time that this movie came out, I guess, wanted to be Paris Hilton. And, like, evidently she's flat chested, but everybody wants to be her anyways because why wouldn't you be when she's, like, technically a millionaire? But they were making the consensus of, like, well, everybody wants to be Paris Hilton. Nobody wants to be Spider-Man. And then Marty makes a joke of like, well, have you guys ever seen One Night in Spider-Man? Really, there actually is legitimately, like, now that we talk about this, there actually is legitimate PORN parodies of Spider-Man that are existing out there now. So there actually technically is a One Night in Spider-Man kind of film. So anybody who has a Google good enough, go ahead and check that out. It'd probably be much easier to just say Spider-Man and then three X's after that, and then you'll find it a lot quicker. Or like any kind of parody of whatever that you are to eventually find, you could probably find it. Probably also a Kick-Ass parody, because I can say that now because it's past the first minute. So going on here, we have Dave, Marty, and Todd, who are to try to make the consensus of why nobody has ever wanted to become a superhero. But then all of a sudden, we have Chris D'Amico, who is to come into this comic book shop. And immediately they're like, oh my god, like, this guy is, like, rich, and he's also connected. Like, could you imagine if we just made best friends with him? Like, man, if we were best friends with him, man, nobody would mess with us. Like, not even, like, a thug across the street. Like, nobody, like, if we just said Chris D'Amico's name, nobody would mess with us. And so Dave is like, well, yeah, like, what if we made really good best friends with him? And maybe, like, like, it could happen. And so both Todd and Marty are hesitant about actually wanting to go over there and actually talk to him. But Dave actually tries and makes a effort. So Dave starts to walk over where Chris is reading comic books, and we immediately have him stopped by this big bodyguard that is just be like, fuck off. Like, no, go away. So Dave, Todd, and Marty all go out, and they ask Dave, it's like, well, hey, man, did you get a little scared? And Dave was like, yeah, I shat my pants a little bit. So Marty is to separate from Todd and Dave, and so both Todd and Dave go out to eventually easily get mugged, because everywhere you turn, I guess you can easily get mugged in this setting. So the thieves are to basically take both of their wallets, because they can't actually take both of their cell phones because Todd's phone was already jacked last week. So they also steal these guys' comic books and like they just steal everything, which just makes Chris want to do, or Chris makes Dave want to do being a superhero a much more pressing thing for him. Plus, they are to see a guy who is to kind of look out his window and just quickly just close his blinds and say or do nothing. Because like people are looking out at him and Dave's like, look at this freaking guy. Like he didn't say anything. Like he doesn't do anything. So, because we have a lot of like eyewitnesses that don't speak up within this movie because they don't want to be involved. So, now that we have that done in that situation, so let's go into the Mindy and Damon stuff. Mindy, of course, who is Hit Girl. Damon, of course, who is Big Daddy. So the thing is that Mindy is homeschooled. So Damon is to train Mindy on a normal experience, and that is to get shot in the chest. Yeah, everybody just has that done to them every single day of their life, I'm sure, right? Like, you just put a bulletproof vest on, and you just get shot in the chest, and you hope it kind of turns out all right, but you never know about these things. So, Mindy is hesitant about getting shot in the chest because it's getting shot in the chest. And so Damon is trying to tell Mindy, it's like, well, like, you know what? Like, a bullet travels at 700 miles per hour, and really with this impact of where I am, like, basically with you having a bulletproof vest on, it's going to feel like a punch in the gut, but that's all it's going to feel like. And so Mindy is like, well, yeah, but it hurts, and like, it, of course it's going to hurt, like, but it's also going to show you that when you actually do get hit, that eventually you will, like, learn how to, like, take the hit, but then continue on fighting, because you'll know how it feels. So, Cindy is trying to negotiate with getting shot in the chest, so she is to tell her father, well, like, if you go ahead and shoot me, like, I want to go and get ice cream after this. And Damon's like, well, what kind of ice cream? And Minnie's like, well, I want a hot fudge sundae. And so Damon is like, good call, baby doll. And so he shoots her. So, and then so she's fine. So they immediately go to this diner to have a hot fudge sundae. And so Damon asks Mindy what she wants for her birthday because her birthday is coming up. And so Cindy is mentioning a bunch of stuff. She's mentioning a puppy, and Damon's like, what? And she's like, yeah, a cute cuddly one. And Damon's like, what? And Cindy's like, and plus also I want a Barbie doll, a movie star, like, makeover or whatever Barbie doll thing. And Damon's is like, like, and then Cindy's like, dude, I'm only fucking with you, daddy. Like, if anything, I just want a butterfly knife or a balisson or whatever it's called. So Damon is like, you know what? Sometimes, child, you throw me for a loop. Like, if anything, you know what? For your birthday, I'm gonna get you 2 balisson, 1 balisson, 2 balisson. I'm gonna get 2 for you. So, uh, so really, we kind of just like transition from this scene, and like, I'm also like, let's get into like the full like origin of Big Daddy and Mindy. Let's get that out of the way so I can cover all that. So for Big Daddy, uh, Mindy was still inside her mother, uh, like when her mother was pregnant. So we had Damon, who was a cop, was a really good cop, and so his partner was this guy named Marcus. So, so Damon had been accused of some kind of like drugs being in his home, and that wasn't actually true because Damon is actually a good cop. But Damon had to be forced to go to prison, and so Damon trained and prepared every single day while he was in prison to be as strong as he could be, to eventually come back and go after Frank D'Amico and his men. And so while Damon was in the prison, we had Damon's wife who had delivered their daughter Mindy, but Damon's wife could not cope of Damon being uh, away from them, and so she ended up taking a bunch of medication that was to have her die. And so Mindy was kept with Marcus until Damon could get back out of prison, and then so Damon kept Mindy and then trained her in how to be a superhero right after this. So now that I got that all of the way, so let's also cover the villain of this story. So the villain of this story, of course, is Frank D'Amico. So in the very beginning of this movie, we have Frank that is to go out to this lumber yard that he is to, I guess, have a side business for. And he is to find out that one of his men had been taken of all of his drugs by a guy that is to look like Batman. The guy didn't say it was Batman, but it was a guy that looked like Batman. I didn't say Batman! Yeah, but you said he looked like Batman, like with a cape and cowl and stuff. Like, yeah, but I didn't say Batman. So they're going to chop this guy's fingers off and like torture him to like have him tell the truth. And Frank is like, well, like Frank is just thinking that's like, dude, this guy's lying to us. He's coming up with the weirdest possible lie he can come up with. Just kill him off and get him out of here. So they kill him off, and so Frank is to go into this car to take Chris, his son, to the movies, because Chris is mentioning like, well, hey, like we only have 10 minutes before the movie starts, and like we're not going to make it. And Frank is like, well, we're only going to miss the trailers. Chris is like, well, yeah, but I really wanted popcorn. And so Frank is like, well, you wanted popcorn? And so he asks one of his bodyguards, is like, well, hey, get Chris popcorn, get him a Coke, get me an icy, you know, the one like swirling with the blue and red. Like, yeah, I want that. Definitely want that. So they go, they check out the movie, and they have an opinion about it and whichever. So moving on. So pushing on, so we are to, and I think I kind of covered a bulk of like all the stuff that I think I wanted to cover in the early stages of this. There's a lot of jumbling around messes that like there's a lot of stuff to cover in this movie. But anyway, so let's cover Dave actually becoming a superhero. So Dave is decided, well, you know what? Like, how about I just get some tights? How about I just like go and put a costume on, and I will just like do all these kind of scenarios in my mirror to see how I look while I'm doing all these bizarre scenarios. and like thinking in my head what all is going to go down and how many cool speeches and whatever that I can make to people. But in real life, like, you don't have time to make all of this dialogue, and a lot of times, like, people will make fun of you for wearing a full on like goofy looking scuba suit or whatever, and so a lot of people like make fun of how you look, but that's perfectly okay. So Dave is to eventually go and make his way from the comic book shop to eventually going down the same alley that he did before, where there are two guys that are carjacking someone. And so Dave decides, you know what, like, I'm gonna go and I'm going to change into my kick-ass costume, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna stop these guys from doing this carjacking, which is kind of inevitable. If Dave stops them, like, eventually they're just gonna come back later and get it anyways. So what's the point? But I guess he was trying to just morality talk to them that it's not the right thing for them to do. So Dave goes and talks to them and kind of mentions, it's like, so you guys are stealing a car that somebody worked their butt off to pay for. Like, isn't that wrong? And so, like, these thugs are like, dude, whatever, like, Green Condom or whoever the heck that you are, like, shut up and get the heck out of here. So Dave goes and pops out his batons and like wants to try to scare these guys away, but that just makes them more angry and more upset. So one of the guys busts out his knife and stabs Kick-Ass, and so Kick-Ass is to fall over, and both of these guys are to run away. Dave gets back up to start walking, and all of a sudden he is to get hit by a car. This car does a hit and run and then drives off after Kick-Ass is to get run over. And so, like, Kick-Ass basically got, like, hit over the windshield of this car. He didn't get, like, dragged under the car. So he should be okay, because the windshield, if you're to hit a windshield of a car, it's probably the safest bet that you are probably going to live after that car crash. Like, because I guess the windshield is, like, the safest thing to hit for a car, because it's, like, the least the least dangerous thing to hit if you're going to hit something from a car. So Dave goes and has paramedics that are to go and unmask him, and Dave wakes up good and well enough to tell the ambulance driver to, hey man, like, tell nobody about the suit. And the ambulance driver promises Dave that, oh yeah, I won't tell anybody about the suit. So what ends up happening is that they cut all of Dave's clothes, but they basically just tell everybody that Dave was naked when they were to find him. I guess to, like, conveniently come up with some kind of story that is to, like, say that Dave wasn't wearing tights and spandex. So Dave is to go to the hospital, and he is to get retrieved by his father, and there is x-rays of Dave that he basically has metal parts, like, put out throughout his entire body. He is almost near close to being Wolverine, and so, like, Dave is like, oh my god, like, I'm Wolverine. And so, like, that's not exactly like a real, like, great thing to be, like, to be happy about, but still, I guess, like, technically Dave is technically Wolverine. So Mr. Lazuski talks to Dave and is like, hey son, like I, like, the the people had told me that they had found you naked. So did the thugs, And Dave's like, no. Like, if anything, they had to cut all the clothes off of me to get to my injuries. And Mr. Lazuki's like, okay. So Dave goes on and is to uh, eventually go back to school, and all of a sudden people are like, everyone is whispering about Dave behind his back. And so all of a sudden we have Dave, who no one was interested about him ever. All of a sudden today, people are starting to be much more interested about him. And so Katie is to approach Dave and say, hey, you know what? Like, I would normally go to this comic shop, the comic shop that you would normally go to. Like, man, I would go there and I would go and get coffee, and like, 'cause I heard there's a really good coffee there. And so, hey, maybe you and I one time can go and get a coffee. And Dave is like, yeah, like, that would be great. So Dave is to just be on cloud nine because it seems like everybody's talking about him. It doesn't matter as long as everyone's talking about him. But Marty and Todd are to pull Dave aside to just be like, yeah, everyone is talking about you, but also everyone is to also mention that you're, gay. And Todd is like, gay? No! Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just everybody is assuming that because they found him naked. So immediately they just assume gay out of that. I don't understand, but it is whatever. So Dave is to eventually still want to still do this whole kick-ass thing, but he needed some time off to heal his injuries. And so Dave wanted to come back, but he wanted to come back with a Kick-Ass 2.0 where like he's trying to take a little bit more risks or trying to test some things. Maybe from jumping from rooftop to rooftop is a thing that he wants to try. And so Dave is just going and still trying to do this kick-ass thing, but nothing is to actually really happen from that. Basically, the only thing that happens is that Dave is to go and find this cat, which is called Mr. Bitey. Dave as Kick-Ass, so Kick-Ass is to go and put this picture to everyone's face and ask if they've seen Mr. Bitey, and they haven't. Dave has numerous people this, and they are all to say no. Dave is to eventually see and spot where Mr. Bitey is, which is on top of this billboard, because this cat is just hanging out by this billboard. I don't know how this cat got up there, but he got up there. So Dave is to try to make up this billboard as well to get to Mr. Bitey. And Dave goes and tries to get onto the spot where Mr. Bitey is, and Dave is consistently calling for this cat, but the cat will not come closer. And so Dave, who is not strong enough, is all of a sudden starting to slide off this billboard piece, and like his hands are starting to slip. So before Dave is to completely fall, Dave is to mention, "You, Mr. Bitey!" And so Dave falls over to all of a sudden smash into this guy that is running from these thugs. So Dave is to be in a midst of three guys who is beating on one guy, and so it seems like these guys are to have like gang tattoos and all kinds of things, or what is to be presumed to be that. So Dave is to see that this guy is getting beaten up by these three guys. So Dave comes in, or Kick-Ass comes in with his sticks and starts swiping at these guys and starts taking them all on because it's the right thing to do. So Dave starts beating the crap out of these people, and so all of a sudden we have Dave who is seeing a guy in a hoodie walk by, and so Dave is telling this kid to call the cops. Immediately, this kid goes into this diner instead and tells a bunch of people, "Hey, yeah, like this guy is in like this like bleh, green jumpsuit, and he's fighting these three guys. It's freaking awesome!" And so everybody like runs to the window and is watching this whole thing play out. So Dave is doing a pretty decent job defending this guy against these other three guys. So these three guys eventually are getting kind of winded, and so one of the thugs or one of the bad guys is to mention to Kick-Ass is like, dude, why are you defending this guy? Like, you don't like he doesn't like you don't owe him anything. Like, why are you doing this? And so like Kick-Ass is mentioning, well, like three assholes laying into one guy, and while everyone watches, it's like that's something that you guys should do. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So eventually the cops are to be called, and then all of a sudden like these three thugs are to walk off, and like they are to basically mention to Kick-Ass, it's like, dude, you got lucky. And so we have the guy that Kick-Ass is protecting, and the guy says thank you, and Kick-Ass is like, no problem. So the guy who is to call upon the diner people to smash their way into the windows to see what's going on, he runs and I guess had caught this whole thing and is asking, hey guy, like, what's your name? And Dave goes, Kick-Ass. And so all of a sudden there is this huge, like, this thing went viral. If anything, everybody is talking about this. Even Craig Ferguson is talking about it. He's like, hey guys, have you guys seen the Kick-Ass video out there? Yeah, like, if anything, I love Kick-Ass. His costume is crappy. He looks like a transvestite or something. And like, hey, if anybody like realize that, like, I am not Kick-Ass. Like, I know people immediately think that. So we have Frank and Chris D'Amico who are watching on as they're covering this story. And so we have Chris that mentions, like, well, hey, like, I would probably definitely call that guy up if I needed a job to do. And Frank is like, dude, I got a number of guys. Anybody that if you had a problem, like, I have a guy that can solve that. Like, we don't need to call this goon. We don't need to call this man in tights kind of thing. So, excuse me. So, pushing on. So Hit Girl and Mindy, or Hit Girl and Mindy, same person. Mindy and Damon, I'm getting the alter ego names confused. So Mindy and Damon. So Damon is to give Mindy her birthday gift, which is a butterfly knife, and basically he is to pop quiz her about a number of things that she easily knows the answer for. And I think the last one was like, what was the best like John Woo movie, which she ends up easily saying the name of. So Mindy is to get this birthday gift, and so we have Marcus that is to come into the fray and talk to Damon. Talk to Damon about that that he kind of misses both Mindy and Damon, and he wanted to see them. And like, Marcus is also trying to talk to Damon because it seems that that eventually, like, that Damon had brainwashed Mindy in this whole superhero thing, and that eventually it's probably going to lead to Mindy's death, and also to have it also lead to Damon's death. And so really Marcus is to try to tell Damon that like he should stop all this, like he should stop what he's doing because it's the wrong thing to do, and that Marcus tells Damon that Damon owes Cindy a childhood, and Damon's like, well, you know who owes her a childhood? Uh, Frank D'Amico. So pushing further on, uh, so let's get into the I think the other lumberyard scene. So we are to have Big Joe. I'm gonna have to reset here for a second. All right, we are to have another guy who is to tell Big Joe that it seems there is another person who is to have lost product, and so we have Big Joe that is going to have to put this guy through a lumber microwave because evidently they don't have the thing that they had before. And so now they have to just put this guy in a microwave and torture him till they get information. What ends up happening is they put this guy in the microwave not knowing exactly how long to put him in there for. And so Big Joe is like, dude, like, this should be easy. It's not a Hungry Man dinner. Like, just put him in there and, like, see what happens. So they start putting him in there, and so Big Joe is consistently asking this guy, like, hey, like, where is our Coke? Who had taken our Coke? He, like, realizes that maybe this guy can't hear him, and so Joe is, like, doing, like, sign language to, like, where is our Coke? And so this guy's head just bursts in this microwave, and so they're like, ah, crap. Well, I guess we're not going to get information out of this guy. So let's push on. So Dave is to start spending time with Katie. So both Dave and Katie are to eventually have that cup of coffee, and Katie is to mention like how like Kick-Ass looks and like how like she might be attracted to him or whatever. It seems like they are dusting out a Kick-Ass comic book that is to be coming out soon. Because I guess since this guy just arrived in town, immediately they're just going to create a comic book for him. A one-shot or a limited edition. And also, is Kick-Ass going to be getting a check from that? I'm curious. So, so Katie and Dave are to eventually have some very intimate moments together where Dave is to help Katie with a tan of sorts, like a spray tan kind of thing, but it's not actually like a spray tan. It's like putting like tan lotion all over Katie's body, I guess, to really just show like, this is gonna get steamy, because Kate is like covering up her chest to where you can't actually see her melons, which is okay. But yeah, you can kind of just be like, something's there. But so Dave is just rubbing all up in Katie and just like, man, my life is just like some like messed up dream that I can't get out of, but like, God, is this like more awesome than my life ever was. So like Dave is trying to like come up with the right moment to tell Katie that he's not actually gay. And at some point Katie mentions to Dave like, it so sucks that you're gay. And Dave is like, yeah, it does, because I'm not actually. So So Katie is to mention to Dave that it seems that Katie was even interested in wanting to email Kick-Ass's site because even she has a problem with a guy named Razul. Uh, like it seemed like she was just taken advantage of, and eventually Kick-Ass is going to go and try to correct that. So, so Kick-Ass is to immediately go once Katie messages him about this whole situation and goes out to try to find this guy named Razul. There is no Dana, only Razul. So Dave goes out and is like, well, I'm going to try to scare this guy because, yeah, I'm so scary. So Dave goes out to find the spot where Razul is, and luckily he does. So Dave goes to this apartment and is to talk to the guy in front of the door, and the guy is like, dude, this ain't no trick-or-treating tonight. And Dave is like, well, yeah, but I really need to see Razul. And so this guy just lets him in. So Dave goes on to talk to Razul, and he doesn't even know who Razul is. Immediately we have one girl who's like, oh yeah, I'm Razul, can't you tell by my big titties? And so she starts like, she starts pressing them around and whatever, and Dave is just in like, like looking at this beautiful woman in front of him. So Dave is to finally see the real Razul, who is playing a video game, and because of this whole dialogue, he ends up dying from this video game, and so now he's angry. So Razul is like, dude, why are you here? And so Dave is like, well, I came here to tell you that you need to leave Kitty alone. So, and Razul is like, and if I don't do that, what then? So Razul with his men that is to surround Dave. Dave is like, because I'm going to come back here and I'm going to break your legs. And so Razul's like, oh, are you? Are you? So all of a sudden we are to have Dave that is to shoot off his little taser that is to hit this guy's face. And he goes down, but then he gets right back up. So all of a sudden we are to see a knife go into the back of Razul, to have that be pulled out, and all of a sudden we are to see Hit Girl. So Hit Girl all of a sudden is to start slicing and dicing through all of these thugs that are in this room, just tearing through all of them, and every single time she is to kill somebody, she is to look at Dave's reaction as he's mortified. It's like, oh my god, oh. And Hit Girl's like, yeah, I can't wait to kill more people to see what he does. Yeah. Because Hit Girl was to see the video with her father, and like Hit Girl is mentioning, like, you know what, this guy is actually pretty good. And Damon is just like, dude, like, if anything, like, this guy gets more beaten up than actually like counters and like defends himself. If anything, his name should actually be Ass Kick. And so Minnie's like, that doesn't even work as a name. The Kick-Asser? The Kick-Assy? Would that work? The Kick-Assy? Is that what his name is going to be? So Hit Girl starts like blading through all these people. Eventually there's one guy who is to have a butterfly knife, and Hit Girl is like, oh, I have one of those too. And so she busts it out, stabs the guy, kicks him into the bathroom. So here's the thing though, when immediately I'm looking at all of Hit Girl's things that she uses, I'm like, hopefully she wipes all these down before she is to go and kill everybody with it, because eventually what happens if she is to leave one weapon off? Like, is that going to be like a thing that's like, oh, well, this girl well, I guess if she doesn't have prints, because she wouldn't be in file, I guess they wouldn't go and try to think that it's her. So I guess she could probably get away with it because her fingerprints aren't in the system, but her father's is. So Hit Girl eventually kills all of these people and is to take the cartridge of taser that Dave had fired. And so Hit Girl kills everybody and then tells Dave, it's like, hey man, we gotta get out of here now. Like, if anything, the cops are gonna come. So Dave tries to go out the front door, and Hit Girl is like, asshole, you can't go out the front door now. Like, if anything, like, follow me. So Hit Girl and Kick-Ass go out to the fire escape to make it onto the roof. Hit Girl goes and jumps from rooftop to rooftop to make it to her father. There was one spot where Hit Girl was to, before we leave this apartment, Hit Girl was eventually to go and not see a guy that was going to attack her. And so Big Daddy was on the other side with a sniper rifle to shoot one of these people. And Big Daddy was to remind Hit Girl, like, that she should always, like, mind her surroundings kind of thing and realize where she should be in especially like a spot where anybody can spring out of anywhere. So that she should always have her back to the wall kind of thing. So Kick-Ass is going with Hit Girl, and so Hit Girl jumps from this other roof. And the thing that I actually like about this movie is they really kind of perfectly tailor the music to what's going on in the film, and I kind of like that. So Hit Girl is to jump from the other rooftop and to yell to Dave to come on, like jump from, like go on ahead and jump like she did. Dave is like, dude, I can't make that. So Dave asks Hit Girl like who she's with, and Hit Girl is like, oh, that's Big Daddy. Because of course both Hit Girl and Big Daddy don't want to tell anybody their alternate personas to keep it all secret. So that is the lead where Dave is to eventually like get out of here and everybody is to get out of there, and eventually Katie is to find out later that Razul is dead. So eventually I think after this we are to like go over the whole like Mindy and Damon origin story that I already technically did go over, so I'm not going to go over it again. I think I got over it. I think I went over it. If not, then yeah. Origin story, blah blah blah. Like Mindy, baby in Mindy's mother's belly. Damon went to prison for. He was a good cop, but he went for prison because somebody planted drugs on him. And so when he came out of prison, he went back to Mindy to make her a superhero and him a superhero so they could fight off Frank D'Amico. Because while Damon was in prison, Mindy's mother died from drug overdose, and so Marcus had Mindy until Damon come back from prison. So that's a bulk of the review in a very quick manner. So pushing on. So now we have Big Joe that is to come to Frank D'Amico while he's having breakfast with his family and is like, dude, we gotta talk. Like, Frank, we gotta talk. It's something big. Something big's going on. So Frank goes with Joe into his office, and Chris is following behind him. Frank is like, where are you going? And Chris is like, dude, like, I want to know about the business. Like, if anything, like, I'm going to turn 18 in, like, 8 months from now. Like, I should know how everything is. And Frank is like, go eat your cereal. Like, like, if anything, eventually you'll get to know the business, but not right now. Like, I'm still alive. I'm still kicking. No, you're not going to know about the business. So Frank goes to talk to Big Joe. I hope it's Big Joe. Uh, it seems like Big Joe. Yeah, Big Joe. Thank God. I thought his name was Louis. So Big Joe tells Frank that it seems that someone had been disguised as the guy that they killed in the very early part of this movie, and that said like, I didn't say it was Batman, like that guy. It seemed that Damon is disguising himself as that guy to try and get certain drug shipments, and so Frank is asking Big Joe, it's like, so I'm getting effed over by a ghost, you're telling me? Like, I'm getting effed over by a dead man, is what you're telling me. So Joe is saying, well, that's not all. It seems that also numerous people have been killed off, which we are to naturally assume it's by this kick-ass guy, because also Razul and all those people were actually tied to Frank D'Amico's business, and so now there's absolutely no drug product out there to be sold. And so Frank is like, so we have no product out there. And Big Joe was like, yep, nothing. Spotless, whichever. So we push on, and so they are trying to figure out, like, dude, we need to get to this kick-ass guy now, and we gotta take him out. So really what they end up trying to do is they end up trying to email Kick-Ass's site, do a number of different kind of fake crimes to see if Kick-Ass goes and tries to intercept a number of these things, and they don't. So eventually it gets to the point where Red Mist has to come in, and so Chris tells Frank that's like, you know what? Here's a way of how to actually uh, take down Kick-Ass. Because what is to happen is that Frank is to get so desperate because no one is taking him out that Frank is to eventually go and drive around the city to eventually see a Kick-Ass who is all of a sudden high-fiving everybody. And we have Frank who's like, I'm going to show him a high five. Like, I'm going to show him something. So Kick-Ass is going throughout the whole entire town high-fiving everybody. And so Kick-Ass turns into a dark alley, and like Frank is getting jazzed. He's like, he's going in the alley. He's going in the alley. So Frank goes and is to greet Kick-Ass, like, hey, Kick-Ass, hey, buddy. Like, and so Kick-Ass goes and kind of shakes Frank's hand and like high fives and whatever. And so Frank all of a sudden kicks Kick-Ass in the head, knocking him down. And then Frank is like, that'll show you to kill all of my men. And so all of a sudden Frank is to go and shoot up Kick-Ass, and all of a sudden there's a witness, and Frank kills that guy as well. So Frank's bodyguard is like, dude, we gotta get out of here. Like, we don't want you to be like tied to any murders. And so Frank is like, yeah. So Big Joe is to be just very upset with D'Amico, and so like Frank is to all of a sudden just be so upset about what is going on that like he had to go and get his own hands dirty to resolve this whole Kick-Ass thing. But it wasn't even the right Kick-Ass. It was actually just a impersonator. And so we have Frank kind of delivering these really fun lines of like, Mommy, I want a Kick-Ass party. Like, dumb little fucks. It's like, so, like, Frank is just like, wait a minute, so this guy has just been out here for just a small blip of time, and all of a sudden, like they have, like, what they have like plates and like napkins of him. Like, what the heck is going on here? Like, we all of a sudden have personators of him now. They're doing birthday parties. What the heck is this? So Frank eventually is getting so emotional that he used to all of a sudden start to take some cocaine. Big Joe is like, dude, you're on the powder again? And Frank is like, yeah, I'm on the powder. Like, that's how bad things are getting. So Chris walks in as Frank has finished taking some powder. And so Chris walks in is like, hey, you know how you can beat Kick-Ass? You can make a superhero that is to seem to make friends with Kick-Ass, so that way Kick-Ass won't feel alone in the world. And then all of a sudden, like, we can turn on him and kill him and unmask him and like we can get him. And Frank is like, dude, like my son reads comic books all freaking day long. Like yeah, like I'm sure he's probably the best person suited for this. And so Chris is like, yeah, and how about you get me to do it? And like, if anything, like all I need is like these short lists of things, and like I'll do it. Like I'll get this. Like it'll work. And all we have to do is just it's just kind of uh like get rid of somebody like Big Joe, and like Big Joe's like, what? And they're like, no, like not exactly like him, just someone else. And then they're like, yeah, we'll get so and so person. Like, oh great. So Red Mist is to go out there and to perform some crime saving thing. And immediately Red Mist is to be on the news after he had done this activity. And so Red Mist is mentioning, you know what, like Kick-Ass has inspired me and inspired the community to go and really try and do good in the world. And luckily I was able to be here at the right place at the right time to stop this man from doing this crime and whatever. So all of a sudden we have Dave and Katie and Erica and Marty and Todd all at this comic book shop watching on as Red Mist has supposedly saved someone. And Katie is to immediately say, man, you know what, that Red Mist guy, like he looks pretty hot. Like looks like he has a better body than Kick-Ass does, and like the cape's really working for him, and yeah. And so we have Todd and Marty who are like, yeah, like Dave is like Red Mist working for you. And so Dave is like, no, like Red Mist is not working for me. So like meaning like Dave is kind of supposedly gay, so he should probably have a detraction to, I guess, another superhero out there. So we push on to just see how like much better that Red Mist is going for the community compared to Kick-Ass. So much so that even Kick-Ass is thinking, well, maybe I should just put on a cape now. Maybe that'll win Katie over even more, because capes are maybe in and I didn't realize it. So Dave is putting on a cape and he's like, God, like I can't pull this off. So he just tosses it, and he has to go onto the Red Mist website, and Red Mist is just like, hey man, you want to hang out? Like, let's go ahead and do that. So Dave is to go and hang and to find Red Mist. And so Red Mist is on top of this garbage dumpster, and Red Mist is like, oh hey Dave, like hey, like. So all of a sudden we have Red Mist who jumps off this garbage dumpster to land, and he's like, oh fuck, like that actually hurt. And so really just Red Mist just wants to hang out with Kick-Ass, because really he's just so cool. And so Kick-Ass is to tell Dave, it's like, well hey, like you know what, I only do this like superhero thing like 9 to 2 on weekdays. So there's a whole curfew to all this. So Red Mist is like, hey, that's fine. Like I just wanted to hang out. So if anything, uh, we have Red Mist who is to take Kick-Ass to his Mistmobile, and of course it looks like this like Mustang cool looking car with like red and black and ooh ah. So Kick-Ass and Red Mist are to get in the Mistmobile, and so we have Red Mist, who is all of a sudden in his car, just like smoking weed, mentioning like, "Hey man, like, weed makes me kind of chill out, like in case we're gonna have to like fight a crowd because chaos can happen, you know." So Dave is just kind of like hanging out with Red Mist, and Dave is like, "You know what? I thought like you were a much different person than I thought you would be," and like Red Mist is like, "Yeah, I guess." So there to say hi. People driving by, like, yeah, we're superheroes. They love us. So the goofiest thing. So going on here, we have Red Mist that is preparing them for what actually is to go on. Is him to have him being put into this lumberyard like thing and to eventually have Kick-Ass get killed. So, uh, Red Mist tells Dave that he's supposedly responding to some call about some woman mentioning that some guy is consistently following her. And so Dave is like, oh yeah, we'll respond to that call. That seemed like an easy thing for us to do. Plus, power and numbers. So Dave and Red Mist go to the lumber yard, and so they are to find out that this lumber yard or this lumber spot that D'Amico has consistently been using for torturing people is now being burnt to the ground. And so Chris is to run into this spot to see if anybody's still alive, and everyone is dead. And so what Chris does is he goes and he takes the this teddy bear and runs out while like Dave is trying to run in and try to find Red Mist, and eventually he does. They get the heck out of there, and Dave's like, "Why do you have the teddy bear?" And Chris is like, "I don't know. I just grabbed whatever and I just ran out." So, uh, so this is all like that spot is resolved. Also, there is one spot that I almost forgot about where I thought was funny, where Frank actually calls the police, calls a detective named uh, uh, God, what is his name? I know it starts with a G. Uh, uh, Detective Gigante. There it is. I'm like, oh my god. Uh, so Frank is to call Detective Gigante and mention how that he should actually step in and do something to stop this kick-ass from killing Frank's men. And Gigante's like, well, technically, a guy who is a superhero, technically that's a gray area. Like, we could stop a thug and we could stop a crazy person, but like a superhero that is fighting crime is kind of a gray area. So really, like, Gigante can't do anything. So eventually, Frank is to hear about his burning lumber yard, and so he's really worried about Red Mist and what had happened. So Chris is to come back home, and Gigante is there, and so Red Mist is to reveal himself to Gigante, and Gigante's like, dude, like, Chris is Red Mist? And Frank is like, well, yeah, of course, Chris is Red Mist. So, Red Mist is to mention that that Dave did not kill off all of these people. It must have been someone else. Because Dave had mentioned that there are other superheroes that are out there. And so Chris had this little nanny cam in the Teddy to, I guess, try to go viral with the revealing of Kick-Ass, but that never happened. So the nanny cam was to showcase that it was actually Big Daddy who went through and killed all these people before Dave and Red Mist were to arrive. So Frank is like, oh my god, there is actually somebody out there, and there is somebody that looks just like Batman. So I didn't say Batman. So now they're like, dude, we definitely need to get these like superheroes. We need to get them now. So Kick-Ass goes and thinks like, especially after the whole like Big Daddy Hitman or Hit Girl situation, like he's kind of thinking about like, well, maybe I shouldn't be a superhero. And then like Dave is consistently weighing on himself because it's like a lot of this stuff is getting way too dangerous. And so we have Dave who wants to eventually scrap him doing the whole Kick-Ass thing, but if anything, there is one last thing that he actually wants to do is to confess to Katie that he is Kick-Ass, plus also tell her that he is not gay. So Kick-Ass goes to Katie and opens and goes through her window and says, "Hey, I'm Kick-Ass. You mailed me." And all of a sudden, Katie is to just beat the living crap out of Kick-Ass, like spray him with this hairspray, and just beat the crap out of him with a tennis racket. And then all of a sudden, she used to get a baseball bat out, and like Kick-Ass is like, "Whoa, whoa!" And so he takes off his mask and reveal that he is Dave. And so Katie's like, "Dave, why do you dress as Kick-Ass?" And Dave is like, "Because I am Kick-Ass, and also I'm not gay." And Katie's like, "Wow!" Like, what the fuck? And Dave is like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, if anything, like no matter how much you're like harsh about me, like doing and saying all these things and whatever, like you can be mad at me all you want, but it can't match of how much I'm mad at myself." So Katie is to just be like, "You know what? Like, I think that you should just leave." And Dave is like, "Well, okay, sure." And so Dave tries to leave from out of this girl's door, and Katie is like, "Well, you can't actually leave outside the normal door because like my mom set the alarm system. You'll have to go out the window." So Dave goes and tries to leave out the window, and Katie's like, "Well, you know what? How about you just stay?" And Dave is like, "Well, mean stay like have a sleepover?" And Katie's like, "No." Like, so, because I think Katie is really starting to get into it, and then also, uh, like she's really starting to realize that maybe she's really liked Dave all along. So all of a sudden, like Katie is to present herself, and Dave is to cop a feel, and then some. So all of a sudden, Katie and Dave are to uh, go on to again do some comic book shopping. And like I guess Katie did like some of the Steve Ditkos that Dave gave her. So uh, Katie is to mention that she would really want to get with Kick-Ass if she was to ever get the chance. And so Dave is like, "Well, hey, like, if you and me want to go to a Kate Hudson movie," and Katie's like, "Yeah, definitely." So they just go out like in a dark alley somewhere and just start going at it like rabbits. Um, so Dave was wanting to take the whole Kick-Ass thing and just like stopped doing it completely. But eventually, when when Dave was to kind of look at the website, it seems like there was a consistent message from Red Mist, and so Dave couldn't deny it. And so Dave calls Katie and mentions that he has to do one last kick-ass thing, and then he'll be done. So, so Dave goes out to talk to Red Mist. Red Mist is to say that someone had found out who he was, and like people are coming after Red Mist, and so since Red Mist is so scared, Red Mist is asking Dave if there was ever any other superheroes that Kick-Ass knows about. And Dave is like, well, yeah, like I know, like some other people. Like, hey, let me just go on my website and mention that I'm going on vacation, and they'll contact me. So, because that's what, because eventually both Big Daddy and Hit Girl eventually go on to find Dave's house, and Dave mentions that like he doesn't know what he's doing because like Big Daddy hid Kick-Ass's IP address because it would have been way too easy to find him, and also like Kick-Ass asked like Hit Girl and Big Daddy like, well, hey, where can I find you? And Hit Girl is like, well, yeah, like just call the commissioner. If anything, he'll just shine a light of a cock on into the sky, and then you'll know that we'll be there. Like so silly. And also, I skipped the part where Hitman and or Hit Girl. I want to say Hitman. Hit Girl and Big Daddy go and kill off Frank D'Amico's driver, who's Cody, and eventually they just like crush him in a like a car crusher thing, because he gives them all the names and addresses, but they kill him anyways. So I kind of wanted to backpedal and kind of cover all the little small stuff because I think we're getting close to the end here. So, good God. So much information to unpack, and we're almost done with the movie. Thank God, because this is a long dialogue of stuff to all talk about. So, plus doing it in a mask also doesn't help either. I know people could say, no, it's easy to do that. Well, this was a mistake. But I'll probably do the exact same thing in Kick-Ass 2. I'll probably wear the mask in there just because I'll remember where it is. Or I'll probably forget about it. I don't know. But anyways, so it's fun to do. It's fun to wear these masks. It's fun. But anyways, so where were we? So Red Mist and Dave are to show up at a safe house that Big Daddy is to give them a location of, and immediately we have Red Mist and Kick-Ass coming in there, and bizarrely we have Red Mist who's like, oh, it's nice to meet you, sir, and like this weird bizarre accent, but then he like walks in and fires two shots into Hit Girl, and then all of a sudden all the thugs of D'Amico all come in and start grabbing onto all these people, and Red Mist is telling them to leave Kick-Ass alone because he's not a part of this, but they take him anyways. So one of the bigger goons also takes a bazooka from this wall, and so they all go on to take both Big Daddy and Kick-Ass, and so they take them to this disclosed location to where all of a sudden, like, Frank D'Amico now has control over the website of Kick-Ass, so they can do this live unmasking to show everyone that being a superhero is a bad idea. So they do this live stream to then pop up the unmasking or Kick-Ass's retirement. The news is covering it until they realize how violent it is, and then they stop the coverage of it. So, because we end up finding out that the goons are going and just beating the crap out of Kick-Ass and Big Daddy, just just knocking them with baseball bats uh, and the batons and all kinds of things. So they are to eventually pour kerosene on both Kick-Ass and Big Daddy, and then they are going to almost light them on fire until Hit Girl is to turn off all the lights and to start going after all these men and shoot them down. So Big Daddy realizes that Hit Girl is here, so Big Daddy is telling everything that Hit Girl is to do. He is to mention things like switch to Kryptonite, go to Robin's Revenge, and a number of also other kind of things, while Big Daddy had been accidentally hit by some lighter that is to burst him into flames. And so he's screaming and yelling, but he's also telling Hit Girl exactly what to do. So Hit Girl is to go and kill everybody off while wearing night vision goggles. So eventually Hit Girl is to eventually kill the camera feed, and then is to try to dust the flames off of her father. Uh, so Hit Girl is to have basically one last moment with her father. And so Hit Girl is to mention to her father that the bullets that hit her from Chris were a lot harder than the bullets that hit her from her father. And Big Daddy mentions, like, well, that's because those were low impact rounds, child. And like, so like he hit her, but it wasn't going to be as bad as what real bullets were going to be like, because like he was like that mattered to him. So uh really Big Daddy was to mention like how proud he was of Hit Girl, how she did this all on her own. And so Big Daddy was to die, sadly enough, burnt alive from how many numerous times that Nicolas Cage has been burnt alive in a movie. Check out The Wicker Man, check out any number of movies. Ghost Riders, how many times has Nicolas Cage been burnt to a crisp? Numerous times over. So that is to push on to have both Dave and Hit Girl in this car driving off uh, to really have Dave ask Hit Girl, what is she going to do now? Where is she going to go? Uh, like, and also like really asking uh, like, you know what, I do owe you one. And so because you saved my life. And Hit Girl is like, well, yeah, but if if you weren't a part of my life, my dad would still be alive too. So, but eventually he probably would have died anyways. It would have been horrific, but he would have been dead. It would have happened regardless. Like, probably, in all honesty. So, because once Frank is to hear that the video is out, that there's a video about Big Daddy going and killing a number of people, Big Daddy is to escalate to want to try and go after Frank D'Amico, because now has to forcibly be the time. So Hit Girl is to eventually get this big package, and Big Daddy was to be happy about it. And so Dave and Mindy are to go back to Mindy's home, and so Dave is to tell Mindy to get all of her things that she wants to pack with her, and Mindy instead is getting ready for war. And Dave is like, dude, I didn't tell you to pack all your guns and things. I said clothes and stuff like that. You're coming like with me. You're gonna like spend the night with me. And Mindy is like, no, we're gonna go and we're gonna kill Frank D'Amico because you owe me. And so Dave is like, well, okay, just let me wash my face first, and then we'll do this. So So Mindy is going to make her way through this building, and then Kick-Ass is going to jetpack his way in. I guess because I guess everybody can figure out how to use a jetpack, so I guess uh, Dave can easily be able to do that, right? So Hit Girl is to go and disguise herself as a normal kid that is going into this building and is to say that she lost her mommy and daddy. And so the doorman is like, "Oh, so you lost your mommy and daddy? Well, do you know the phone number? Like, here, let me give me my cell phone." So Mindy is to put a gun in this guy's face to go and eventually shoot out all the guys in the first floor. So then Mindy is to change her disguise to be Hit Girl and is to start going through all these floors, knocking everybody out. The coolest scene, I think, in this entire movie is to see Hit Girl just go through the main floor of all these people and just starts shooting them off one by one. And then eventually she gets into the kitchen. And like we have one guy who's like, "Dude, I don't have a gun." And so they give him one. And so this guy just lights up all this like spot of this kitchen to have the guy assume that Hit Girl is dead. And then all of a sudden Hit Girl is to fling these knives into this guy and kill him off. That's the cool spot. So Frank and Chris are in the office room, and so one big goon comes back with a bazooka and mentions that everything is handled, and Chris is like, "Dude, you have a bazooka. How exactly is everything being handled?" So this guy is to come in and just hunch over this bazooka, or to plop onto this bazooka to position it. And all of a sudden, we are to see Kick-Ass with this jetpack, and he is to have these Gatling guns, because this is the first time I've ever actually said that correctly. Because normally there is a Gatling gun moment, but I never remember the actual name of it. So now I bizarrely know it, because I guess I've seen this movie. So there are Gatling guns attached to this jetpack, and so all of a sudden we have Kick-Ass lighting up both of these Gatling guns with this jetpack, and murdering every single thug, gangster, whichever in this whole entire room. So Chris and Frank think that everything is solved, that it's like, man, that was a weird sounding bazooka. So Hit Girl is to make her way into Frank D'Amico's office, and eventually Kick-Ass is to make his way into this uh, into this uh, uh, spot as well, into this room, to have Kick-Ass fight Red Mist, and Hit Girl is fighting Frank D'Amico. So what happens is that Frank is fighting Hit Girl, and Red Mist and Kick-Ass are fighting in the like karate room. It seems that both Kick-Ass and Red Mist knock one another out, but it seems that Kick-Ass is the one that's first up. So Frank D'Amico is starting to really lay into Hit Girl, and so Frank immediately tells Hit Girl it's like fun time's over, and Hit Girl's like, "I never have fun." So Frank starts beating the crap out of Hit Girl, like mentioning how like you killed some of my men, boo hoo hoo. So so eventually, while Frank is to be assuming to be a winner out of all this, we all of a sudden have uh, Kick-Ass who comes back in with a bazooka to hit Frank and have him go flying out of this building to die in the sky with this bazooka hitting him. So we really, after that, we are to assess or to assume that everything is taken care of after that, that basically no one else is a threat here, and that both Hit Girl and Kick-Ass can leave. So Kick-Ass and Hit Girl are to get the heck out of here, and Mindy, before they are to go on this jetpack and get out of here, Mindy is to reveal to Kick-Ass who she actually is. And Dave is like, oh, well, like, I'm Dave, of course. And Mindy's like, I know. Like, I knew. So Dave still wants to, like, see to it that Mindy is, like, protected after all this. So, uh, Mindy is to end up with Marcus, and so Marcus is actually wanting Mindy to go to public school, where if there are bullies that are going to hurt her, like, which is not going to happen, like, supposedly Dave is going to have to watch over her. So cue us seeing that Chris is now going to be the next Frank D'Amico, and that he's mentioning it's like, like a very iconic man just said, wait till they get a load of me. And so we have Red Mist, who has changed his costume to be instead the mother. So, like in the sequel film, he's going to be called the mother a lot, and so that's going to be his code name. So, but really, he's not going to end up in the same building as in the second one. Basically, he's going to go off with his mother and live in some spot somewhere until they eventually decide to uh, go and move somewhere else, because eventually, let's not talk about spoilers, eventually until I watch Kick-Ass 2. So, really, that's just the real and true legitimate end of this movie, and that's me calling it a day because this took way too long to review. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.